Loving a beautiful woman is tough. Everyone notices her. Everyone wants her. Maybe it's an ego thing, but I've been let down before, by friends who bailed and lovers who didn't care enough. Each time it happens, it just makes me more convinced. When you're with a woman like that, you can't help but notice every glance she gets. I was driving from Denver to Santa Fe when a 70s song played on an obscure FM station. I didn't know anyone in Santa Fe. All my friends and family were in Denver, where I have season tickets to the Colorado Avalanche. Hockey doesn't exist in Santa Fe, and besides, my company has 6 offices in Denver, so there was no reason for me to be in a place like this. I'm in the investment business, and now we're opening a new office in Santa Fe. It'll be based in an apartment near Presbyterian Medical Center. Funny enough, I grew up Methodist. But let me rewind a bit. My name's Ethan Caldwell, but my friends call me Caldy. While most of my friends went to Northwestern, I spent 3 years in the lumber business. Yep, I was a lumberjack. That's where the nickname came from. I still have my gear, and my 2005 Harley-Davidson Softail Standard is in perfect shape. My ex-wife and I used to ride it all the time, but those days are over now. Born and raised in Denver, I never left, except for my time in Oregon working in the woods. Afterward, I joined my Uncle Joe's investment firm, and he helped me get into the University of Denver for a finance degree. 12 years ago, when Uncle Joe retired, he sold me the business. At the time, we had 4 stores, and I grew the business by opening 2 more, expanding our staff from 26 to 31. Even through tough times, we made sure our customers were taken care of. But enough about business. Let me tell you more about my ex-wife, Emily. I knew Emily Sutherland in high school, though we didn't run in the same circles. She played soccer. I played hockey. She was an honor student. I was the gruff hockey guy. We barely crossed paths. I wasn't bad-looking, but I had long brown hair and a rough-around-the-edges vibe. Hockey players talk differently, too. Throwing in a damn or two just feels natural. We were a tight-knit group, and our parents hung out too. Sometimes it felt like the rest of the world didn't care about us. So, Emily and I were more acquaintances than anything else. Emily is stunning, with fiery red hair, a lithe build, and piercing green eyes. She has that kind of beauty that turns heads. Her grandmother was Irish, came over in the 50s. Emily could have had any guy she wanted, but she didn't go for the star athletes. They were usually idiots. She stuck to a small group of friends and occasionally dated some of the more popular guys. We reconnected 3 years after I returned to Denver from Oregon. I'd put on some muscle from working in the woods. I was playing in a men's league hockey game when I saw her walk in. Her friend Kara, who was dating our goalie Joe, had gotten hooked on hockey and brought Emily along. Ty, one of my buddies, nudged me. Caldy, is that Emily Sutherland? I looked over. Yeah, I think so. Wow, she's here at the rink. She's with Tina. Must be her friends doing, I said. I figured I'd try to impress her. I scored 2 goals and an assist that game. Afterward, as I was leaving the warm-up area, I saw Emily. Hey, Ethan. Great game. Aren't you going to say hi to an old school friend? I shrugged. Sorry, Emily. Didn't realize we were that close back then. But it's good to see you. I put my bag down and offered her a handshake. I'm a hockey guy, not the best at small talk. She smiled, took my hand. Maybe if you stepped away from the rink once in a while, you'd know I always thought you were a nice guy. She scrunched her nose. What's that smell? I laughed. Sorry about that. Hockey bags tend to stink. I'll throw them in my Jeep so you don't have to suffer. She looked a little hurt, but I didn't get why. We barely knew each other. Ty ran up as I got to my restored 2005 Jeep Wrangler Rubicon. Caldy, you heading to O'Connell's for a beer? Emily's coming too. You think she's turned into a snob now that she's hot? Could be. Don't mess it up, bro. I grinned. My grandpa Tucker used to say, I may not be handsome, but I'm no fool. So, I agreed to meet up. I was the first one at O'Connell's. I grabbed a Coors and sat down. When Emily walked in, she came straight to me. Caldy, she said. Is that what they call you? Sorry if I came off rude earlier, but your bag, it really smells. I chuckled. No worries. I'd rather talk without that stink too. We spent the next couple of hours talking. She had me buy her a beer, and she returned the favor with 2 for me. We caught up on the years. She went to UCLA, studied marine biology, worked at the Southern California Marine Institute, and even learned to surf. But eventually, she came back to Denver, her mountain home. Now, she's working toward a teaching certificate to teach middle school math. She seemed fascinated by my logging experience and liked my Jeep. She laughed at the hockey lingo I explained to her. "Hey, Jacker, can you grab me another beer?" I rolled my eyes. "It's Caldy, not Jacker." I pointed to the server. She smirked. "Well, since you ignored me at the rink, I figured Jacker was a better fit." I smiled. "Let's have some fun then." She winked. "Maybe." Before we left, she gave me her number. "Call me," she said. "I'd like to ride Greta. If you'll take me. It's on my bucket list." I waited 2 days to call, not wanting to seem desperate. Finally, I dialed her. "Hey, Emily, it's Ethan. Want to ride with me this Saturday? There's a music festival in Leadville." Her response? "Screw you, Caldy. I have my own plans and can't just drop them for a hockey player," Emily said. I was confused. "Sorry, Emily. Maybe next weekend?" "Screw you again, Caldy," she replied. "I'd love to join you. What time?" "How about 9 a.m.? "I'll be ready," she said, then added, "Wait, I don't know where you live." "Figure it out, Jacker." She hung up and I muttered, "It's Caldy." I called Toomer, who got her address from Tina. Saturday morning, I knocked on her door in Golden at 9 a.m. sharp. She opened the door, wearing shorts, a white tank top, a red and white plaid shirt, and black cowboy boots, with a UCLA sweatshirt tied around her waist. She smiled at my reaction. "I take it I passed the test?" "Yes, you did." I handed her my spare helmet, and we hit the road. The ride to Leadville was perfect. Colorado summers are warm but cool in the mountains, so we stopped to put on warmer clothes when we hit the foothills. She wore her sweatshirt, and I put on my black biker jacket. "If we do this again, I'll dress like a biker girl," she said, poking me. Leadville was amazing. Live bands, delicious tacos, and hours of conversation. Everything went smoothly, except for the guys staring at her. Some were discreet, others not so much, and it bothered me that she seemed to encourage it with her smiles and winks. Still, I enjoyed our time together. When I dropped her off around midnight, we talked at her door. She gave me a friendly kiss, thanking me for the day. "I really enjoyed today, Ethan. Greta was great. Call me soon." She added, "Thanks for not bringing your hockey bag." She said she wanted to call me Ethan, unlike everyone else who called me Jack or Jackie. That day marked the start of 2 months of casual dating, which eventually led to us becoming exclusive. We texted and talked daily. Emily earned her teaching certificate and landed a job at a local middle school. For months later, we introduced each other to our families. I met her 2 younger sisters, Sophie and Claire, her grandmothers, and her grandfather. She met my parents, my brother Ryan, Uncle Joe, and my grandparents. After several family gatherings, including Thanksgiving and Christmas, I decided to assess our relationship. I called a war council with Dad, Ryan, and Grandpa Caldwell. We met on my porch in early January, gathered around a table with a fire burning and a bottle of 15-year-old Glenlivet. "Well, guys, here's the deal," I began. "I've been dating Emily for almost 6 months, 4 of them exclusively. I have feelings for her, and before I make any big moves, I want to know what you think. I need the truth from each of you. Grandpa, I want you to listen and challenge their opinions if necessary." Everyone nodded. "Okay, Ryan, you're first." Ryan, 20 months younger than me, always looked up to me as a kid, but he was the smart one. He just finished his master's in applied math and loved figuring things out. 2 years after I returned from logging, Ryan borrowed my bike for a week while he was at CU Boulder. He spent most of the time taking it apart and improving the fuel system. When I got it back, it ran better than ever. "Caldy, if this were math, I'd talk about hydrodynamic factors, but I'll keep it simple. Emily seems great. She has a good job, she cares about you, and doesn't take herself too seriously. No long list of exes, that's a good sign. You both have real affection, respect, good communication, and healthy conflict resolution." He paused. "But you need to be on guard. She's beautiful, and other guys will notice. My main concern is how short a time you've been together. I'd say wait at least 6 more months before locking things down. You're both 27, so there's no rush." Dad chimed in next. You're smart and mature with great business sense. You've handled your personal life wisely. I think you'd make a great husband. Emily seems wonderful, but I agree with Michael's caution. Your mom and I dated from 16 to 23, with some breakups that helped us understand what we wanted. A little more time in courtship wouldn't hurt. He looked over at Grandpa. Grandpa leaned back in his chair, sipped his whiskey, and stared out at the mountains for a moment. Finally, he spoke. Beauty is skin deep, but ugliness goes to the bone. He took another sip of whiskey, staring at the hills again. It was cryptic, and I was about to ask for more when Dad gave me a look that told me to wait. Grandpa continued, his voice calm. Ethan, Emily is a sweet girl, beautiful, no doubt. I can see you're in love with her. She's got good qualities, but she craves attention, always needs to be the center of things. That kind of behavior makes her seem immature and narcissistic. She can't stay quiet, needs constant engagement, probably because she wasn't disciplined as a child. Dad cut in. What are you getting at, Dad? Grandpa stared into the distance. Your dad grew up in the 70s, always into rock and roll. I never understood it until I heard a song he played in '79, Bob Seger's Hollywood Nights. Dad interrupted. Bob Seger, Dad. The song Hollywood Nights. Yeah, that's right. It's about a young guy, heartbroken by a beauty queen, Grandpa finished. Grandpa's voice broke through the silence. She was born with a face that could get her anything she wanted. He saw that face and lost control. My point is, Emily knows the power of her looks, even if she doesn't always use them. That's the ugly side of your relationship. Will she flirt with other men after you're married? Even if she's faithful, won't men still come on to her? How much time will you spend worrying? Will she respect you enough to stop? He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. My advice? Take it slow, but add one thing. Ask your uncle for a 6-month break. Go back to Oregon and work in timber, but take Emily with you. Get away where she knows no one and see how you settle in. She can substitute teach, so her career won't be on hold. If she agrees, even nervously, you've got a foundation. If she refuses, it's a sign to slow down. I sat back, letting his words sink in. Emily can get anyone, and that's something you need to deal with now, he continued. If she's ugly inside, it's better to know now than 5 years from now with kids involved. I thought about the advice from 3 smart men who cared about me. That night, we watched the AVS dominate Vancouver, and we occasionally talked about Emily. I slept on it and decided I needed more time with her, just the two of us. I wasn't ready to propose yet, but I agreed with the advice. There was no rush. 2 weeks later, I took Emily to our favorite pub in Golden. Richie, a hockey buddy who owned the place, seated us in the back for some privacy. So, are we just casual today, Ethan? Or is there an agenda? She asked, looking stunning as always. I smiled. Somewhere in the middle, I guess. I've never seriously dated anyone, but I've fallen in love with you. I'm not sure of the next step, but I want to move towards something long-term. If you agree, I've got some ideas to discuss. Emily looked flattered. You just made a lot of sense without saying damn. I've been thinking about this too. I'm scared, because I'm falling in love with you, and I've never been in such a serious relationship. For the next 20 minutes, I laid out my plan. We'd spend at least 4 more months just focusing on each other, spend more weekends alone, and dedicate 2 nights a week to talking about serious topics. I suggested we ask older couples we respect for advice and see if we were truly compatible in all aspects. Emily teased me about it, and I joked back, earning a playful punch. "Want to come, handsome?" she asked, flashing her intense green eyes at me. "I agree with your ideas," she grinned, "and I can teach you a few things. Let me get the check, and we'll start the lesson now," I offered. "How about we start the first lesson right here?" she said, as we finished our beers. We rode back to my apartment on Greta. When I unlocked the door, Emily whispered, "I'm not sure I should be alone with a hockey player. I might get taken advantage of." I opened the door, smiling. "No way, girl." An hour later, we fell asleep in each other's arms. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so content. For months passed, almost without incident. But there was a flaw I should have seen. About 3 months in, we went to a pub with live bands. We were having a great time, and Emily was teaching me how to dance. I went to the men's room for a couple of minutes, but when I returned, I saw Emily talking to a guy I didn't recognize, standing way too close to him. I stayed calm, ordered another round, and watched as Emily giggled and touched the guy's forearm. She didn't seem to miss me at all. When she saw me, there was a brief look of guilt, but it quickly faded into a smile. "Ethan, do you remember Liam from high school?" she said. Liam smirked, extending his hand. "Hey, Ethan, good to see you. It's been about 10 years. You look great." I shook his hand. "Yeah, good to see you." A couple of things stood out. First, he called me Ethan, not Caldy or Rexy, meaning he wasn't a hockey buddy. Second, Emily knew she'd crossed the line. The moment was telling. "Liam, why don't you join us? Are you here with someone?" I asked. "Thanks, I'll join you," Liam said. "No, just here with some buddies, but I can ditch them for old friends." "I can't believe you're solo," Emily said. "There are plenty of ladies here who should notice you." Emily kept talking to Liam, never acknowledging me or thanking me for the beer. Then she turned to Liam and asked, "Why don't you spin me around on the dance floor?" That was it. Strike 3. She didn't even check if I was okay, didn't even look at me until she grabbed Liam's hand and led him to the floor. "Be back in a while, babe. Don't flirt while I'm gone." Liam looked nervous. He was taller than me, but I could tell he was a clean-cut guy who'd never been in a fight. I'd had my share in high school and later in logging, where I got knocked around a bit, but learned to control my temper. Liam didn't attend our school, but he seemed to know who I was. "Do you mind if I dance with Emily?" he asked. "Of course he doesn't," Emily answered for me, leaving no room for objection. There's no fourth strike in baseball, and Liam avoided one by at least asking, respecting the unspoken male code. Emily, however, was in for a wake-up call. When they returned, I was gone. I took Greta for a moonlit ride home to cool down. We didn't live together, and call me old-fashioned, but I believe it's disrespectful for a man to ask a woman to live with him without a ring. It just makes it too easy for him to take advantage. The ride home took 20 minutes, and another 20 passed before Emily's calls began. "Ethan, where are you? I can't find you at home. Why did you leave without picking me up? You look like you were having too much fun with Liam." I ignored the calls. I wanted a good night's sleep before the storm that would come in the morning. At 7:30 a.m., Emily burst in, her green eyes blazing. "You son of a cow, Ethan. How dare you leave me like that? Are you such a little boy that you ran away because you were hurt?" Her nostrils flared, and her face was red with anger. If I hadn't been a lumberjack, I might have been scared. "Would you like to sit down and have a cup of coffee, Emily?" "No, screw it. I don't want to sit and drink coffee with a juvenile like you." I kept my tone calm, which only seemed to make her angrier. "Okay, suit yourself. Let me be blunt. Emily, I love you deeply and want us to be together, but I won't tolerate disrespect. What you did last night was unforgivable." I laid it out. "We're not just dating. We're committed. We agreed to deepen our relationship intentionally. Liam was in your personal space, and you didn't check if that was okay with me. You flirted with him, told him other women should notice him, and asked him to dance without even looking at me. Even Liam tried to ask if everything was all right, but you didn't give me a chance to respond. How is that respectful? How does it show your love for me?" I paused, then added, "You like the attention you get from guys, and that's fine, but I won't compete for you. We're past that stage. I'm yours, and you should expect love, respect, and honor from me, just as I expect the same from you. If you don't see it that way, let me know. It will hurt, but I'll respect your choice and move on. But if you love me and want to continue, you must respect and honor me." "Imagine if it were reversed," I said, "and a woman flirted with me in front of you. How would you feel if I ignored you and danced with her without asking?" For a moment, Emily just stared at me. I thought she might walk out, but then tears filled her eyes, and her lip quivered. Suddenly, she threw herself into my arms, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I didn't think. It was horrible of me. I can't believe I treated you like that. I love you and want to be with you. Please forgive me." She cried harder, and I held her as she caught her breath. After a moment, I gently pushed her back, looking into her eyes. "I forgive you. I love you, but we have to be clear. We can't disrespect each other. I know guys will always hit on you, but we have to set boundaries. I know, Ethan. That's exactly it. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I must look terrible. Let me wash my face, then let's have coffee and talk about growing in our love. 5 months later, we were married on a beautiful Saturday near Breckenridge. It was a gorgeous late May day, sunny with temperatures in the mid-60s. Despite my hockey buddies' boisterous congratulations, it was a peaceful event, surrounded by family and friends. We vowed to forsake all others and live together as husband and wife. We enjoyed the day until 6 p.m., when we headed out for our honeymoon. Greta took us to the airport for our flight to Cabo. After 9 amazing days, we returned to Denver at the start of summer. Over the past few months, Emily and I had many long conversations and walks, addressing important issues. We even saw a therapist to discuss family backgrounds, expectations, and communication. I felt confident that I had followed the advice of the 3 men who loved me most, and now I was embarking on the journey of a lifetime with the woman I truly loved, who truly loved me. How is it that just 4.5 years after my divorce from Emily, I find myself single again, driving down the highway by myself? I thought I had done everything right. Emily and I had put in the work, emotionally, psychologically, and relationally. We discussed our future, our expectations, and committed to love, care, and respect. But, in the end, it didn't matter if one person was fully committed if the other wasn't. Emily had her own definitions of those words, ones she never shared with me, and they turned out to be vastly different from mine. There were patterns in her life she couldn't, or wouldn't, change, and they slowly put us at risk. Grandpa Caldwell had been right. Emily was stunning on the outside, but her inner world was much darker. I hadn't seen it then, but I should have. A year before everything fell apart, Emily had gotten an incredible opportunity. She was hired to teach Algebra 2 and trigonometry to 10th graders at the local high school. It was a big deal. 2 older teachers were close to retirement, and Emily was on track to teach AP Math soon, according to her department chair, Dr. Alan Price, or Alan the Devil, as I came to call him. In the beginning, Emily was thrilled. Every night, she'd come home bubbling with excitement, telling me about her students, the joy she found in teaching math, and how supportive Dr. Price was. I didn't think much of it at first. He seemed like a nice enough guy, someone who genuinely wanted to help his staff succeed. But looking back, I should have been more cautious. Dr. Price was 15 years older than Emily, married with 3 kids. The first time I met him, I was expecting someone extraordinary, someone who had earned the admiration she so openly expressed. Instead, I was underwhelmed. He was a regular guy, about 5 feet 3 inches and trim for his early 40s, but otherwise unimpressive. Nothing about him stood out. I couldn't understand why Emily was so enamored with him. It felt like she viewed him as some kind of role model, and I listened patiently, though I couldn't relate. I figured it was just professional admiration, so I never questioned it. But then I began noticing something disturbing. 90% of our conversations were about her work, and 75% of that was about Dr. Price. When I talked about my day, whether it was work, family, or hockey, she'd listen for a couple of minutes before changing the subject back to her world. I thought it was normal at first, but it began to wear on me. I felt invisible in my own marriage. It wasn't until I had a conversation with my mom that I began to recognize how deeply this bothered me. We were talking about Christmas plans when she asked, "How's everything with you and Emily?" "Okay, Mom," I replied, brushing it off. "Really?" she pressed. "Are you sure?" I don't mean to pry, but from the outside, it looks like Emily is always talking about herself, her work, and Dr. Price. She never seems to ask about you or your day. Her words stung, but they were the truth. I never even realized how much of our relationship had become one-sided until my mom pointed it out. Enthusiasm in a relationship should be mutual, and Emily had stopped showing any enthusiasm for my life. She was always the one getting attention, while I was left to quietly support her. My mom encouraged me to take a closer look, so I did. I started keeping track of our conversations. As someone who works with numbers, it was easy for me to notice the patterns. Sure enough, most of our discussions revolved around Emily's world, her job, her students, her mentor. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was a mere bystander in the relationship, always there when she needed support but never really present for me. Determined to address the growing disconnect, I decided to plan a weekend getaway. I'd always been the one to organize trips in the first few years of our marriage, so it wouldn't come as a surprise to her. I booked a cabin near Aspen, checked our schedules, and made sure there were no conflicts. The idea was simple: a weekend for just the two of us to reconnect. When I told Emily, I expected her to be thrilled. Instead, she paused, looking annoyed. "You should have consulted with me first," she said. "Alan has a mandatory faculty meeting next Saturday. We need to discuss new curriculum ideas." I was taken aback, but I checked our shared calendar. It didn't show anything about a meeting that weekend. She hesitated. "It was scheduled a week ago. I thought I added it to the list, but maybe I forgot." I felt my frustration bubble to the surface. "Emily, you're working so much already, and now Dr. Price controls your weekends too? This isn't fair." She replied dismissively, "It's just one Saturday, Ethan. Alan wants the best for the students. We can find another weekend." "No," I shot back. "It's not just one Saturday. It's the principle of the thing. You made this calendar for a reason. We agreed to use it so we wouldn't forget anything, so we wouldn't cancel on each other. But now you're letting him take priority. I can't keep pretending like this doesn't matter to me." Her eyes narrowed. "Alan is just trying to do what's best for the department. It's not like I want to miss our weekend." "But you're always missing out," I said, my voice rising. "It's not just this weekend, Emily. You've been emotionally checked out for months. I've been supporting you through everything. Your career, your excitement, your frustrations. But you never ask about my day. You don't care. You're too busy chasing his approval." She didn't respond right away. The silence between us felt heavy, charged with everything unsaid. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "I didn't mean to make you feel like this," she said quietly. "I'm sorry. I got caught up in everything, and I guess I forgot about us." I looked at her and saw that she was genuinely remorseful, but it was too little, too late. "It's not just about being sorry, Emily," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I can't keep being the only one making sacrifices. I can't keep competing for your attention when you're already giving it all to him." She looked down, then back up at me. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I love you." But love wasn't enough. Not anymore. "Damn it, Ethan. You're making a big deal out of nothing. We can just reschedule." I stood there, feeling my anger flare. "I'm sorry, Emily." "You're right," I said sarcastically. "Forgive me for treating you the way you treat me. Forgive me for wanting to plan a nice weekend with my wife. Forgive me for stepping on Alan's precious schedule." She opened her mouth to reply, but I turned and walked out. I grabbed Greta, my bike, and rode around for an hour to cool off, except it turned into 3 after stopping at the local pub for a few beers. When I got home, the house felt icy. We only exchanged brief, cold glances. I worked in my office for a while, then crashed on the couch. I'm an early riser, a habit I developed from my days working and logging, when mornings started before dawn. Emily usually got up around 6:15, so we didn't cross paths. I canceled the cabin reservation, losing a $100 deposit. It wasn't much, but it still made me sad. Later, I checked the shared calendar. Emily's faculty meeting was listed, as well as a math conference in January and 2 girls' nights out. I couldn't resist sending her a snarky text. "Going to the rink after work. Game at 7, beers after. I'll be home around 11. Check the shared calendar if unclear." It's been there for 2 months. No response. The next week, we barely spoke, each of us waiting for the other to apologize. I was upset she didn't update the calendar, and she probably expected me to come crawling back. We were both disappointed. Then, the following Saturday, Emily surprised me with a kiss at breakfast. "Ethan, I hope we can talk and make up today. I understand your disappointment, but I'm sure we can work things out," she said, winking as she left. No apology, no acknowledgement of her mistake. Seeger's lyrics echoed in my head. A face that lets her get her way. I grumbled for half an hour, but then decided not to waste the day. The porch door had been creaking for weeks, so I took it off its hinges to oil it, but realized we were out of oil. I jumped in my Jeep and headed to the hardware store. Mick's hardware store had been around since the Great Depression, passed down through generations. Alex IV ran it now with his sons, Alex V, and Jason. Jason and I played hockey together, and Alex V only worked weekends since he taught math at Emily's school. Imagine my surprise when I walked in and saw Alex V helping a customer with a snowblower. He waved as I walked in. The look on my face must have caught his attention because he found me in Section 9 a few minutes later. "Hey, Caldy. Heard you had a goal and 2 assists on Thursday. Jason said you played well for an old man." "Hey, V," I replied, trying to keep things light. "Yeah, it was a good night. Sorry, I was a bit thrown off. I thought Wellborn had a middle school math meeting today. Did you quit your job?" Now he looked embarrassed. "I'm still teaching, but Wellborn didn't schedule a meeting for today. He's arrogant, but not that stupid. Did Emily tell you we had a meeting?" I kept my composure. I must have misunderstood. I thought she said you had a meeting. Then another thought hit me. "Hey, V, does the math department attend conferences?" "Yeah, the next seminar's in Estes Park at the end of March. I'll be there, then hit the slopes afterward. Stay calm." I replied, "Sounds like you plan to attend half the meetings." "Yeah, I must be getting old," he chuckled. "See you later, Caldy." I paid for the oil and walked out, my mind racing. Why was Emily lying? I drove past the school twice, checking all 4 parking lots. No cars, no lights. My suspicions were growing. I couldn't just sit at home and wait for answers. I pulled into a coffee shop, grabbed a cup, and sat in the back, scribbling notes on a napkin. An hour later, I had a plan. I called my insurance agent, Nate "Cookie" Grayson. He was surprised to hear from me on a Saturday. "Caldy, did you break your leg trying to improve your skating skills?" he joked. "Not yet. Cookie, I need to meet you at your office," I said, my tone serious. "Okay, give me a few minutes." 15 minutes later, I was sitting across from him in his conference room. "When you suspect insurance fraud, do you hire a private investigator?" "Sure, but why do you need one?" Cookie asked, raising an eyebrow. I hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Cookie, this is confidential, right?" He gave me a look. "Of course." I leaned in. "I think Emily might be having an affair, and I need to find out. Can you help?" He frowned, his expression softening. "I hope you're wrong, but I know a top-notch investigator. She's tough as nails and always gets results. She's not cheap, but she's the best." "Thanks, Cookie." The investigator's name was Ava Harper. Since PI's work odd hours, she agreed to meet me later that afternoon. I went home, finished the porch door, showered, ate, and met her at 1 p.m. Ava was small, maybe 5 feet tall, but she radiated strength. She smiled politely, but there was a no-nonsense edge to her tone. I explained my situation, and she quickly laid out the terms. "If you want a detailed report, it will take a few weeks, maybe into the new year. I'll need $1,500 upfront, and the rest will be invoiced later." I sent the deposit while she asked a few more questions. We shook hands and parted ways. Back at home, Emily was humming in the kitchen when I walked in. I kissed her on the cheek and said, "I need to shower." It was a low moment, but I knew I had to keep up appearances. Secrecy was my only path to the truth. I had tickets to the AVS Preds game that night, and Emily rarely joined me. I was taking Ryan instead, and she seemed fine with that. Before I left, I lied for the first time. "Emily, I'm sorry I overreacted this weekend. I wanted us to go away, but I shouldn't have talked to you like that. Please forgive me." She smiled, her tone softening. "Of course, Ethan. I understand your frustration. We'll go soon, just the 2 of us." But the next 6 weeks felt like an act. Christmas was a blur of exchanging gifts, visiting my in-laws for lunch, and hers for dinner. It was like we were going through the motions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were drifting further apart. New Year's Eve was no different. We went out for dinner and dancing, but the physical part of our relationship felt empty. It was as if we were pretending to be happy, and neither of us believed the act anymore. That Sunday, we had dinner at my parents' house. Ryan, Uncle Joe, and Grandpa Caldwell were there, too. As we were about to leave, Grandpa quietly pulled me aside. I could see the concern in his eyes, and I wondered if he knew more than I was ready to face. "I'm sorry, Ethan," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "Sorry for what, Grandpa?" I asked, confused. He gave me a sad smile. "Sorry I was right. About the ugliness. I swallowed hard. How's that? He placed a hand on my shoulder, strong despite his age. You'll get through this. We're all with you, no matter what happens. I felt a lump in my throat. Grandpa's strength reassured me, but it also made the reality clearer. Everyone knew something was wrong. I had to do something about it. 3 weeks later, I sat in Ava's office. She had called the day before to say the report was ready. I was dreading what she would tell me, but I also couldn't live in uncertainty any longer. I'm sorry to tell you, Ethan, Ava began, her voice calm but firm. Your wife is a lying cheat. If you need a moment, take it. I couldn't respond. I just nodded. Go on. Alan entertains your wife. They meet at the Hampton Inn in Englewood, where there are no offices nearby. They keep it discreet. They also meet at a rest stop or truck stop, far enough to be out of sight but close enough to get home quickly. There was no conference in Colorado Springs. They spent that weekend in Gunnison, in a remote cabin. They meet about every 8 or 9 days. I've documented at least 6 meetings since you hired me. I have pictures, video, and phone conversations. It's all here. She slid a thick folder across the table. I advise you not to look at the pictures or recordings just yet. It's a lot. I didn't want to look at it. The truth was there, but it felt like an impossible thing to face. I could already feel the weight of it pressing on me. I've done everything I can, Ava continued, her voice softening. You're no longer in the dark. Now, you can take back control of your life. I stood up, my hands shaking as I grabbed the folder. My mind was spinning. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do something. Thank you, I mumbled, feeling like I wasn't even in my own body. Ava watched me go, and I could hear her words echoing in my head. She was right, but knowing the truth didn't make anything easier. I climbed into my Jeep and sat there for a moment, feeling the cold weight of the snow against the windshield. I could barely breathe, but I knew I couldn't go home. Instead, I drove to the Hampton Inn in Englewood. I parked in a spot where I could watch the entrance, hidden by some bushes. I decided to wait for an hour. I called Cookie. Caldy, I'm sorry as hell. If there's anything I can do? It's done, Cookie, I said, my voice tight. Cover for me tonight with the guys. I'll call you tomorrow. Score a couple of goals for me. You got it, brother, he said. I didn't have to worry about whether Emily would show up. 35 minutes later, Alan arrived and went inside. 5 minutes after that, Emily parked and met him at the side door. They shared a quick kiss before disappearing inside together. I felt my stomach churn. My body went numb. I threw up all over the bushes. It wasn't just anger I was feeling. It was the gut-wrenching realization of what I had seen. After that, I couldn't stay there anymore. I drove to my parents' house, needing to be with my family, where I could fall apart without judgment. On the way, I called my dad. I need to tell you something. It's about Emily. There was a long pause. I'll tell your mom. Come here. When I arrived, Ryan, Uncle Joe, and Grandpa were there too. Mom opened the door before I even reached the steps, and I collapsed into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. We went into the living room, and I told them everything. I hadn't looked at the report yet, but I knew enough. I spoke through my tears, unable to stop the pain from spilling out. My family just listened, letting me vent. Mom stroked my back, comforting me the way she had when I was a child. By the time I finished, we were all in tears. Grandpa spoke first. We're all deeply saddened by your pain, Ethan, but you're not alone. We'll stick together. We'll get through this. I wasn't sure how to feel, but knowing my family was there, ready to support me, gave me a sliver of hope. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't completely alone. We would all like a few minutes alone with Emily and her boss, Grandpa said, his voice calm but firm. But we must be wise. Speaking out now would be the wrong approach. Let's chat some more, then adjourn for the evening. Take a strong sleeping pill, and we'll pick this up in the morning. Tonight's discussion won't help. As I told you before, we are all with you no matter what. Everyone looked at Grandpa with wide eyes, realizing he knew exactly what was going on, even if they hadn't pieced it all together themselves. No one was upset that he hadn't told them sooner. He was the cornerstone of our family, the one they trusted without question. You're right, Dad, my father finally said. What about Ethan's absence tomorrow? Will Emily expect him to call or be home by early afternoon? Uncle Joe jumped up. I can handle it. Ethan told Emily he's busy in Boulder. This storm gives him a perfect excuse. I'll call her in the morning and say it's serious and only Ethan can handle it. We agreed to the plan with a few additions from Mom and Dad. My brother hugged me tightly, his tears flowing freely. Uncle Joe hugged me too, and Grandpa took my face in his hands. You'll get through this, Ethan. You have my word. After everyone left, I went to the guest room, took a couple of sleeping pills, and was out like a light. The next morning, I woke surprisingly calm and determined, though still weighed down by sadness. Emily had made her choices, breaking her vows and neglecting me. Now, it was time for me to make mine. My family's love would help me endure, and my long-term plan was already starting to take shape. By 8:30 a.m., we reconvened around the kitchen table. By noon, we had the basics of the plan ready. My next stop was a lawyer that Uncle Joe recommended, someone experienced with cases like mine. At 1:30 sharp, I walked into the law office of Beach. I was seated with Victoria Beach Lane, a pleasant-looking woman in her late 40s with steely blue eyes and a firm handshake. She practiced family law exclusively and never represented a cheating spouse. She was well-versed in Colorado divorce law. "What do you want when the dust settles, Mr. Caldwell?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet," I said, my voice steady. "I don't want her to get more than she brought into the marriage, but I know that's unrealistic. Our prenup protects my family business in case of infidelity. I want my name clear, and I want everyone to know her infidelity is why I'm suing. I want his name public, and I hope he gets fired. Mostly, I want to move on with my life." "Most of what you say makes sense," she replied. "I'm glad you have realistic expectations. As your lawyer, I have to ask, are you planning to damage them?" "No, ma'am, but I can't guarantee what some of my hockey buddies might do," I said, a dry chuckle escaping despite myself. She smirked. "Good," she replied, then winked. Two brothers played at the University of Denver in the early 2000s, Caldy. I know the lingo. "Well, Mrs. Beach Lane, looks like I found the right lawyer," I said. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell, call me Beecher if you like," she smiled. Before I left, we agreed on 3 things. I would leave the PI file with her for review. She would file for divorce within 24 hours, and Emily would be served after school on Friday in the parking lot. The shock of it would hopefully make Emily react in a way that would benefit us. I would meet Emily at home on Friday night to confront her and demand she leave since the house was in my name. We also agreed to continue monitoring Emily through the PI. The bill was already around $5,000, which frustrated me, but the situation was what it was. Beecher emphasized staying calm, leaning on my family for support, and continuing to live my life as normally as possible. We exchanged cell phone numbers for any questions that might arise. Before leaving, I asked, "Why isn't the practice called Beach, Lane, and Beach?" She smiled. "I'm patient, Caldy. Daddy will retire in 3 years, and then I'll be senior partner. It will be Beach, Lane, and Beach." I texted Emily as I left her office. "Finished with this mess on my way. I'll be home around 6. She replied almost immediately, "Can't wait to see you," with a heart emoji. I deleted the message, trying not to let the small gesture of affection get to me. I went to my parents' house to update them. Ryan was there with Mom and Dad. I also called Grandpa to bring him up to speed. "You're already talking better, Ethan. I'm proud of how you're holding up." At 5:30, I headed home. Emily was upstairs, but came down when she heard the door. We exchanged kisses and hugs. I showered, changed, and we made a simple dinner of burgers and salad. I realized I hadn't eaten in over 24 hours, and suddenly, I was starving. As dinner ended, Emily started to flirt. She wore a baggy shirt, no bra, and leggings. She placed her leg in my lap. Despite the sudden arousal, I felt disgusted. She was still my wife, but the thought of making love to her now felt unbearable. "You may have been Caldy last night," she said, "but I hope Caldy takes his wife upstairs tonight." I could feel my body react despite myself, but my mind screamed no. "Sorry, babe, my head's still not in the right place," I muttered, trying to hide the truth. Emily seemed to pout, but it didn't matter. It was just a matter of time before everything came to a head. I could only pretend for so long. You may have been Caldy last night, but I hope Caldy takes his wife upstairs tonight, Emily teased, her voice playful. Sorry, babe. My head's still splitting from the last 2 days and the drive in the snow, I replied, feeling a tightness in my chest. She looked surprised, her eyes wide. I could count on one hand the times I turned her down for lovemaking and still have fingers left. I understand, she said softly, her disappointment palpable. I wanted to tell her to have fun with Alan at the Hampton Inn, but I didn't. Instead, I suggested, how about we take a bath, and I'll give you a back rub? She smiled, clearly not expecting that, and I gently removed her foot from my lap. She spent a long time in the bath, and I gave her a back massage, fighting the urge to strangle her. After about 20 minutes, she drifted off to sleep. I covered her, moved as far away from the bed as possible, and stared at the ceiling. My anger churned beneath the surface, but I had to keep it together. The next night, I had a hockey game. Emily didn't suggest I skip it, understanding I'd already missed Monday's game. Thursday night was harder, but dinner with her parents made it easier. On the way home, she clearly wanted something. I discreetly texted Uncle Joe before we even left. 2 minutes after we arrived home, my phone rang. Ethan, sorry to bother you, Uncle Joe said. Are you with Emily? Yes, Uncle Joe. We just had dinner at the Sutherlands. Hi, Emily, Uncle Joe said, his tone flat. We're a little busy. Can Ethan call you back in the morning? Emily winked at me. I'm sorry, but this can't wait. Jackson's investment file wasn't finished. Tina went home sick, and we need it for tomorrow's 7:30 a.m. meeting. Damn it, Uncle Joe. I pretended to sound frustrated. Okay, I'll drop Emily off and meet you at the office in 30 minutes. Thanks, Ethan. Sorry, Emily. Uncle Joe, you owe us a steak dinner at Capitol Grill, Emily grumbled as she sulked. Deal, I said, trying not to laugh. What does a girl have to do to get her husband in bed? Emily complained, clearly annoyed. I refrained from saying what I really wanted to. I know, babe, but I'm sure you'll get a break one of these days. She didn't notice I said you instead of we. For the last 10 minutes, she hummed and sulked, the car heavy with tension. When we got to the house, I rolled down the window and called out, I won't be in for another 3 hours. Why don't you wait for me? She didn't look back, just waved and walked inside. Screw you. Friday was the most unproductive day of my career. I arrived early, leaving Emily a note that I'd be there before dawn to ensure we had an uninterrupted evening. After catching up on paperwork and making a few client calls, I checked the time. It was only 9:30 a.m. I told Donna, my assistant, that I was heading to the gym, where I worked out furiously. After meeting Dad and Uncle Joe for lunch, I returned to the office for another 2 unproductive hours before heading home. I arrived an hour before Emily. As I approached the front door, Emily was finishing her last class of the day. Alan slipped into her classroom, grinning like the fool he was. Sweetie, how about a detour on the way home this afternoon? Alan was charming and good-looking, but Emily, who could get her way with men using just her looks, was growing bored with him. He was good in bed, but his job had limited prospects, and he was 15 years older with a wife and 3 kids. He wasn't going anywhere. I'm sorry, Alan, but Ethan and I haven't spent much time together this week. How about we meet late Sunday night? Ethan has a game at 5, so I could meet you between 4 and 6. Alan wasn't happy but understood. Okay, I'll pick you up at the bus stop at 4 sharp. Emily was relieved. She was finally going to end it with Alan. He'd been treating her like a princess, but his behavior was starting to feel entitled. Emily always had the upper hand with men, including me. She wasn't about to let Alan or anyone else control her. After grading some math tests, Emily realized she adored her husband. He was strong when needed, but also pampered her as she deserved. He was a great provider and would make a wonderful father, just like his father and grandfather. Deep down, she knew she couldn't promise never to cheat again, but she vowed to rededicate herself to him. But that's when her self-delusion began to crack. She should have recognized her selfishness, her narcissism, but she didn't. She didn't see the ugly truth. Excuse me, are you Mrs. Emily Caldwell? A woman asked as she approached Emily in the parking lot, holding a manila envelope. Beecher always used women for serving papers, less conspicuous. Yes, that's me. Sorry, I don't recognize you. Who are you? I have an important document for you, the woman said, handing Emily the envelope. May I see some ID? Emily, embarrassed and curious, showed her faculty lanyard. Thank you, Mrs. Emily Caldwell. You've been served. Emily stood frozen, staring at the papers in disbelief. Wait, what? I don't understand. What is this? The woman didn't respond, walking away as Emily stood there, the weight of the situation starting to sink in. Slowly, reality began to sink in. No, this can't be happening, Emily hissed, tearing open the envelope. The top of the page read, Statement of Dissolution of Marriage. No, 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 it can't be, she thought. Ethan would never do this. He adores me. He loves me. He can't know about Alan. We've been secretive. There's no way he could know. Her mind raced, but deep down, she knew the truth. If Ethan knew, he would have confronted her. Oh God, I have to go home and make this right. She fumbled with her keys, dropping the papers as tears welled up. After gathering everything, she climbed into the car, sobbing, her hands shaking with fear. Her mind was a whirlwind. She tried to calm herself, but nothing seemed to make sense. She'd never had to deal with something like this before. No real shocks, no real stress. It took a few minutes to collect herself, but as she drove home, she alternated between hysteria, anger, and tears. When she finally reached the driveway, her resolve returned. She couldn't fall apart now. I'll tell Ethan what I need to. No one, especially Ethan Caldwell, had ever treated her so shamefully. How dare he pull such a stunt at her workplace? By the time she walked through the front door, she had already come up with a plan. She would explain everything to Ethan. She was certain she could make him see that this was all a mistake. As she entered, I was already sitting at the kitchen table, another folder laid out before me. She ignored it, moving forward with her prepared speech. Ethan, my love, this must be a terrible mistake. Why would you divorce me? We love each other. You are my soulmate. What made you do this? I remained calm. Emily, please sit down. She sat, but I didn't break my gaze. Emily, I've learned some disturbing things about your behavior. I'm giving you the chance to come clean and tell me the truth. I promise to listen without interrupting. If you explain honestly, I'll reconsider. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. But Emily, before you start, let me make this clear. I'm going to record our conversation on my phone to avoid any misunderstandings later. You have one chance to be completely truthful. If you lie or misrepresent your actions, it's over. I'll proceed with the divorce immediately. It's up to you to share your thoughts. She looked at me, eyes wide, but then she began. I don't mind writing this down, Ethan, but I'll tell you the truth. Alan Wellborn forced himself on me. He used his position of power to impose himself on me. I fought him off time and time again, but he made it clear that the only way I could advance in my career was to sleep with him. I hated every second of it, but I endured because I was overwhelmed and didn't know what else to do. Her voice trembled as she continued. I didn't want to tell you because I thought I could handle him and was afraid you would do something crazy. When it became clear that there was only one way to satisfy him, I did sleep with him, but it was only once, and I hated every second of it. Today, after school, he tried again. He was in my classroom, trying to get me to sleep with him before I went back to our house. But I turned him down, Ethan. I swear, I turned him down. She put her head in her hands and began to sob, the sound fake and forced. Clap, clap, clap. I gave her a sarcastic applause. My heart broke at her obvious lies, but part of me had to give her credit. Maybe after the divorce, she could pursue an acting career. Emily, I'm really sad, but that was an amazing performance. Ethan, what are you talking about? How can you say such horrible things after I gave you my soul? She cried, her voice filled with disbelief. Emily, you've always had a knack for getting your way with men, including me, I said. You're beautiful on the outside, and sometimes we gullibly believe there's inner beauty too. But let me tell you what I know. I opened the file and began to lay out the case. You've been sleeping with Alan for at least 2 months. You meet at the Hampton Inn in Englewood. I slid photos across the table. At least 6 rendezvous in the last 2 months. There was no Saturday morning math meeting in early December and no teachers' conference in Colorado Springs. I have recordings of your conversations, including one where you talk about how much you love Alan and how much you enjoy your time together. So, my dear loving wife, you certainly don't look like a woman who was coerced. Your voice in these recordings speaks the truth. You had fun with Alan at least 8 times, including a weekend in Gunnison. I leaned in closer. This only shows you are a deceitful wife who thought you could get away with it. Emily sat speechless for the first time in her life. The realization was sinking in that her charm and manipulation no longer had any effect on me. For the first time, she could not flirt her way out of this. She broke down in front of me, her tears real now, but too late. You broke my heart, Emily, I said quietly. I have no idea how many tears I've shed over the past couple of months, coming to grips with your betrayal. My relationships at work, with my family, they've all suffered. Her sobs filled the silence between us, but there was nothing left to say. Everything had changed, and there was no turning back. My self-esteem has hit rock bottom, Ethan thought. Why? Why did you destroy our love and our marriage for some fun on the side with a school teacher? He remembered the pictures of Alan, and though they sickened him, he couldn't help but note, he's no better than I am in bed. At least I brought love into it. He never did. His anger began to rise. You know what, Emily? I've realized you're not worth my tears anymore. My feelings are hurt, but I'm not hiding away. You're an ugly, selfish person inside. I'll move on, knowing I gave you my best. I'm not perfect, but I never deserved your contempt. I don't care about you anymore. Some say the opposite of love is hate, but Ethan knew it was indifference. That's how I'll treat you, he thought. You won't matter to me anymore. It'll take time to heal, but from now on, you're nothing to me. Emily blinked, disbelief on her face. Ethan, No. Emily, no more, he replied. I've packed a bag for you. You can grab other things from upstairs, but you're leaving today. My lawyer's contact info is in your packet. When you want to get more of your things, let her know, and I'll make sure I'm not here. She tried to protest. But Ethan, please forgive me. I was scared to tell you the truth. I messed up, but we can move past this. I want to be with you, and only you. Scared, Emily? Ethan asked, his voice steady but laced with bitterness. When have I ever made you afraid? I've never raised a hand or my voice at you. If you were scared, it was because you knew you couldn't have it all. Her stubbornness flared up. Ethan, I won't leave like a defeated woman. You can't kick me out. This is my home too. Emily, Ethan replied calmly. I bought this house before we married. It's in my name. We have no children, so you can't claim the house for childcare. Our prenup clearly states that I keep my assets if we divorce due to your infidelity. Your looks might usually get you your way, but you should have read that document more carefully. She was losing ground. I don't want to take anything from you, she said, her voice faltering. I want us to be together. Alan means nothing to me. I was planning to break up with him on Sunday afternoon. Ethan's gaze hardened. Sunday afternoon, while I was at my hockey game. Even if I believed you, and I don't, it's too late. It was a stupid affair. I have no excuses, Emily admitted, her voice breaking. But you can't end our marriage over this. We're meant to be together. Yes, Emily, it was stupid. Also selfish and cruel. But let's be clear. I'm not giving up on our marriage. You destroyed it with your affair. You burned our love with your lies about that work meeting. If you can't see that, I feel sorry for you. I'm just ending our sham marriage. Emily broke down in sobs, realizing the full weight of her actions. Ethan waited for her to compose herself before he spoke again. Where will I go? What will I do? She whispered, her voice small. That's up to you, Emily, Ethan replied. My family knows what happened, and they've supported me. I haven't told your family yet, but I will if you lie to them. I won't attack Alan Renoff, but by Monday, your principal will know. I won't sue the school, but I won't hide your affair either. Alan's wife will hear the truth if she asks. He has 3 kids. Their lives will be affected, and that's on you. He paused before adding, I'm done taking care of you. The locks are changed. I haven't touched your money. The divorce settlement is fair. Contact your lawyer and sign the papers. Now, please gather your things and leave my house. Emily finally gave up. She wiped her eyes, went upstairs to gather a few things, and then left through the kitchen. Ethan sat in silence, exhausted but relieved that it was over. "I'm sorry, Ethan," Emily had said as she left. "Yes, Emily. You are," Ethan replied quietly. 8 months later, Ethan was divorced and on his way to Santa Fe. Why leave town? He thought. I need some space, like when I went to Oregon 15 years ago. I'll spend a year or two starting the business, hire someone to run the New Mexico office, then move back to Denver. His hockey team would miss him, but he needed a new adventure. The only woman he planned to spend time with was Greta. As for Emily, he'd heard some of the hockey wives had taken her on a girls' weekend when the affair came to light. She didn't have the best time, thanks to her ex-friend Tina. As for Alan, Ethan knew that his life had fallen apart. Dr. Fielding and the principal had made sure of that. His contract wasn't renewed, his wife divorced him, and his kids refused to talk to him. And, as for the fall down the stairs that left Alan with broken ribs, teeth, and an arm, Ethan didn't feel much sympathy. The hockey guys were all at O'Connell's when it happened, and word had spread. Maybe Bob Seeger was wrong. Sometimes, you do have to feel a little sorrow to heal.